Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 10, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Also want to thank Andrew Nichols for introducing us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Darrell Vickers. Is that the correct way to pronunciate it?
Yes, it is. That is absolutely correct.
Darrell, thank you so much. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Toronto. I moved back here a couple of years ago, just in time for the plague and to have the border closed. So I've been up here for almost 3 years now.
Darrell, what's the best thing for a human being?
I think it's to own a dog, to know a dog. I think the the unbridled love a dog gives you. There's a stupid meme on a lot of social media that says I strive to be the person my dog thinks I am, and to have something in your life that thinks you're that wonderful for almost no effort on your part, I think it just improves. Anybody would have one, and I don't have a dog. I actually walk somebody else's dog 4 or 5 times a week. I have a couple of cats, so they don't like dogs. But I think that would be my answer. Get a dog.
I like that. I actually have had that. Someone said animals, in general, but it is a beautiful thing how we can share with these
I
other
think
creatures.
the empathy and taking care of something other than yourself and not just being a loathsome, selfish sloth is probably a good thing.
What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, I think since the age of the computer, because I'm a writer, I'm tied to the computer all the time. So whether it's a site or whether it's YouTube, I mean, anytime I have to put shelves together, I look at a YouTube video. In fact, the green screen behind me, I didn't know how to work it on this particular software, so I went to YouTube. Some guy on YouTube showed me how to do the green screen, and that's what I did. So yeah, so that the computer, you have to be careful because you can get a lot of shitty information on the computer. But if you're careful, I think it's all there, and especially for a writer, back in the old days. We were doing Andrew Nichols and myself, we were doing a script for a country doctor, city doctor thing, and we needed some information on animals, and this was in the 80s, and we had to literally walk down to the Sherman Oaks library, get books out on animal husbandry, and look shit up and write it down, and then bring that information back. Now it takes 4 seconds on a computer to find the same stuff.
It's beautiful. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think humans collect everything. I think from the dawn of time, they would collect bones or favorable shaped rocks or whatever. And I think that has progressed and evolved to Hubble plates and fungo pops. Now it's just, every people take a look at me. I've got 30,000 records. People collect things, and I think information is, if it's not newspapers, it's a lot cheaper than records, and it doesn't clutter up your living room. So it's one of those easy things to, you put stuff in your brain to amuse girls at parties, and it's just, I think it's one of those natural things that people have really forever.
And we're looking at your record collection.
Unfortunately, this is just a small portion of it.
That's mainly 12-inch vinyl. Is that what you mainly
Mostly,
collect?
though, I do have a lot of 78s, and lately I've got a lot of 40. But I probably have about 30,000 12-inch, a few thousand 78s, and probably a couple of thousand 45s.
Nice. Well, we'll get into music in a while. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented in humans?
Well, I think it's just a natural evolving thing. I mean, ants trade information, and bees trade information of where good pollen is. And I'm sure that back in the day, somebody went out for a piss and saw a mastodon limping past, and you went back and gave that information to some guys with spears. I think it's just it's something that I think is necessary for survival. And, well, any kind of communal animal like men or ants or baboons, I think they all have information and they all, there's been things that they've had in Japan. There's a monkey they have where certain monkeys would dip their food in the salt water because it tasted better. And they pass that knowledge on to other, whatever the monkeys are. And apparently raccoons, they'll figure out in one area how to open a certain type of trash can, and that knowledge will spread further and further afield, and those baboons will pass on that information. And I think it's just part of surviving.
Yeah. Darrell, do thoughts create emotions?
I think almost anything creates emotions. I mean, you smash your hand with a hammer, it's an emotion. Certainly if you see something sad or read something sad or happy, those are emotions. I was very, very ill in Italy and almost died. And I can remember the time that I would watch commercials and I would get unbelievably emotional that the woman's detergent had never made her children's clothes so white. And I was practically in tears for some reason over this revelation that she'd found this stuff. So your brain, I don't know, it's a weird functioning thing that if you're almost dead, you're really emotional. I just think there's all kinds of ways that emotions come up. I've said it's like they can pop up in any number of ways, like raccoons in your backyard. It's just,
Yeah.
they're just there.
Dude, you're great with metaphors. I really appreciate this. So, Darrell, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Well, I try and be an open-minded person, and I try and accept information that I don't particularly like, and that I think has become a much harder thing to do in the last few years. I think people like Donald Trump have trumpeted that stupidity and that ironclad belief that nothing can penetrate whatever your belief system is. So I think it's one of those things where you try and be open-minded and you double check whatever that thing is, and then that allows me to think, well, is this true, is this not true, regardless of my own personal feelings on it. That's tough.
Yeah. So maybe that was good, but so maybe you'd say, I don't know what I think until I double check it.
Well, it depends if it's information, if it's
Yeah.
do I think this person's an asshole. There's so many different things you think about. You know, I judge people pretty quickly. I'm a pretty good judge of character. I'm always studying what they say and what they do. So, but I try and always be willing to change my mind should something come along later to upend what my earliest thoughts were.
Beautiful. Can humans think without language?
Yeah, I'm a very, very language oriented person. And being a writer, I guess that's very, very fortunate because, I don't read very fast because everything I read, I narrate in my head. That's the way but not everybody's brain works that way. I mean, animals think without language. I mean, they don't speak. So, I do. I think there are times when you're furious and it's that moment where you pick up that claw hammer and crush somebody's skull in. There's no real language going on there, but there's an anger and there's at least that's for me when I do it. But it's one of those things where there are times where language fails you and there is just that quick response to something that doesn't require, oh gee, I think I'm going to hit that guy with the claw hammer now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you got ESP anticipated the next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways because it entails. Chomsky says a language is not just words; it's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language breaks down, when it doesn't work?
Again, it's situational. When I was almost dying in Italy, language didn't work because almost nobody spoke English. So it was, it's unbelievably isolating because A, I was very, very ill, and B, I couldn't communicate how I felt and what I needed to them, and they couldn't really communicate what they needed me to do properly. It was, it was very touch and go in, you know, it's guesswork, it's things. If it's a language breakdown where I'm trying to convince somebody to do something, and they're not buying whatever I'm trying to impart to them, well, then I just shut down. I mean, there's a point where
Yeah.
you're just kicking that dead horse. It's pointless. So yeah, it depends on the situation. Language sometimes does fail. I mean, there's lots of cases where, you've tried to talk your way out of something, or you've tried to talk your way into meeting a girl, and no matter what you say, it fails.
Yeah. Darrell, are humans more feeling beings or more thinking beings? Your general observation. Again, I know it's situational and I know it's a stupid question because we can't separate feeling from thought. We invented the words so we think we can, but just in general, what's your observations of
Well, I
humans?
think it's tough to generalize, because
Yeah.
I mean the thing about human beings is their IQs are vastly different. And I think, does somebody think as much when they're have an IQ of 85 as somebody who has an IQ of 150? I don't think so. And perhaps that time, when the dumber you are, uh, probably not a PC thing to say, but the less intellectual you are, the less time you spend thinking, that time is filled up with more feelings. So, I mean, everybody feels, but I think probably people who don't express themselves that well and don't spend a lot of time, thinking about the origins of man, probably fill that with feeling hungry, feeling angry, feeling isolated, feeling sad, feeling happy. I think it's a sliding scale to me.
Yeah. I know it's not always advised to try to make a funny person laugh with a stupid joke, but I have to tell you this because I was in Canada and I was talking to a sophisticated doctor at an art opening. And I said, "Where'd you go to school?" And he says, "The oldest college in the world in Italy." I says, "Wow." I said, he says, "Did you see the movie by Fellini, La Dolce Vita?" And I goes, "Yeah." He says, "I lived La Dolce Vita." And then, the next day I thought, what would have been a good comeback? I should have said, "Have you ever seen the movie Dumber Dumber? I lived." And I had never even seen the movie, but I just thought of a stupid comeback to his comment.
Well, coincidentally, when I was almost dead in Italy, I was staying in the oldest functioning hospital in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
It might be connected to
Luckily,
that.
they'd upgraded some of the equipment since they started. So, but
Two questions talking about back rear view mirror. Alan Turing questions from 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
well, I would think, to me, a potato thinks more than your soul, because at least a potato exists. To me, there is no God, there are no angels, there's no Mr. Pointy Tail Devil. It's just us sitting on this rock, waiting to die.
The second, very good. The second question that Turing asked was, can machines think?
Well, machines can replicate certain things that we, I think, recognize as thought. I mean, you 2 plus 2, or your favorite music based on an algorithm and things like that. But thinking, there's more of a choice to it, and machines don't have choices. It's, you put something in and it will give you something back. People, aren't like that. You may not get the same answer every time. With a machine, you do. It's a whole different thing. I once rented this movie called Crust. Now, Crust is about a 6 foot talking no 6 foot boxing shrimp. So I looked it up on Amazon, and at the bottom it says, if you like this movie, you might also like uh, Shakespeare in Love. Now, is that thinking? You go from a 6 foot boxing shrimp to Shakespeare in Love? What's the thought process there? So I think, yes, if there is any kind of machine thought process right there, it's pretty flawed.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I, Boy, I think I would like to think I pursued happiness. I think happiness is such a, there's a lot of meaning in the world. There's very little happiness. I think most people, any kind of small little nugget of happiness you can find, hold on to that fucker like it's a winning lottery ticket, because I mean, the world is a sad, horrible place where people suffer. And I mean, we're lucky we live in the West. I mean, the things that we have that are, we consider a shit breakfast. People living in other parts of the world would love to have that problem. We are very, very lucky that we can even decide: do we want to be happy, or do we want to have meaning? Even that alone shows how elevated we are on the level of humanity. Because yeah, so I'm to me, boy, if you can die happy, you've really beat the odds.
Really well put, Darrell. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I was just looking at a thing on consciousness, so I don't even know if I can answer this, because uh, I can't remember the guy's name. It was like Anvil something. Very bright guy, but he'd written a whole book on trying to describe consciousness, and basically saying most of the definitions you that are out there are complete garbage. So I think probably this one it is for better minds than my own consciousness.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I think speed of light, and I think as I get older, light gets further and further ahead. It's thinking is some people think really quickly, but even then, it's not like the speed of light. I mean, you go back to the old hammer thing. You smash your hand with a hammer. You look at your hand as it's throbbing. It takes a couple of seconds to go, wow, I really fucked up, and then the screaming starts. So that's not quick. I mean, there's a process that goes on in thinking that is not like light. Light is gone; it's out of here. So, yeah, I would if I were a betting man and I had a couple of bucks, I would put it on light.
You brought up tools. So again, you got ESP anticipating next two questions. And just before I started, I love Mark Twain's line: when you got a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
So Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, I mean, I cheated a little, and I did see this when you asked Andrew this,
Yeah,
and I think it is possible to dismantle the house using the master's tools. And I think a prime example is what's going on in American politics at the moment. That the United States and the Republicans are turning, and they will turn the United States into a totalitarian state. And when, apart from that stupid, apart from Trump trying to actually overthrow the government with, because that's a new tool, basically, just marching in with a bunch of imbeciles. But beyond that, they don't need that. They just need gerrymandering. They need the Supreme Court. There's new legislation now they're thinking about where they will allow legislators in states to decide whether they're going to accept the votes of the people or just pick the winner.
yeah.
They will get rid of the gerrymander. They will get rid of the filibuster, and they will pass laws, and they will basically shrink down the electorate till they're, unless you're a Republican, you can't vote anymore. So they are not breaking any laws. These are all tools within the Constitution that they are using to basically get rid of democracy, which the Constitution was. So I think you can use the tools that are there if those tools are flawed. And obviously, we're seeing 200-300 years later that with the right amount of distaste for people's votes, you can use those tools to do exactly what you want.
Really well put. In Marshall McLuhan, a Canadian, learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we might be able to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So McLuhan probed this question his whole career. And I ask you, Darrell, and when I say artists, I mean comedy writers, musicians,
Yeah.
in general. Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, we come back to not liking information we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And I think, if you look at Ibsen, Enemy of the People, he's basically trying to save them from poisoning themselves. But because they make money at the factory, they do not want to hear that. He becomes the problem, even though he is the solution. I think the problem we have is we have this American lie that in every movie, that no matter how many differences we have, that when there's a big universal problem, all those people will come together and mend those differences to fight the common enemy. But what you saw with COVID was the exact opposite. We fractured. We didn't come together. We became two separate camps. We had people who were uh, fighting against the solution literally to their death. We had people calling it a hoax, even though there were thousands of people dying in hospitals. Over 1 million people dead, and still you can't convince some of these people that it was real. People were pulling people's masks off in subways. It Humanity is unbelievably flawed, and they are selfish and they are stupid, and that's a prime example right there that it really is. It's a nice homily that we should all get together and fight a common enemy, but in reality, as we've seen, we won't. We'll fight each other and just flail away until the last man is standing and coughing.
And coughing, really. Well put. Do artists have moral obligation?
I don't think so. It's we. I think artists have some sway over the populace, but not a lot. I mean, as I said, Ibsen wrote this play, which if you read it, it has profound meaning and a lot of implications for society. Nobody cares. Nobody, people will watch it, and there's a few people who go, "Wow, that's really serious," and then there are people out there, ripping people's masks off in subways. It's that inability to accept anything, you know. Am I an artist? I wrote for television. Am I a very talented, sausage maker? I fed the machine all those years. I just make people laugh. Occasionally there was a point. Do I want somebody who works in the government or Exxon to have more morals than say a guy who writes jokes for Benny Hill? Yeah, I think that's more important than a guy who's actually can impact things who runs Exxon. I mean, obviously they don't have any morals, but if somebody there did, that would have far more impact than me writing the next joke for God knows who.
It's really well put. We're going to get into comedy in a while, but Ibsen did have an impact. He spawned James Joyce, and they claim James Joyce wrote the greatest book ever, but nobody can read it. So there you go. There's a fine line. But yeah, it's amazing. How do you measure the impact Ibsen's Enemy of the People had? It's like, from your experience of studying it, it sounds like it didn't have an impact.
Did the Bible have an impact? I mean, people they just pick the pieces they like, and half the people
Right.
believe that abortion is tragic, but it should be up to the person. The other half believes people should be burned at the stake, and it's the
Yeah.
same book. So, if you can interpret the Word of God, to that far, from going from Jimmy Carter to Jerry Falwell,
Yeah.
then is there any hope? You can get any meaning you want from any piece of literature you want because people extract those bits they like.
Yeah. I always wonder, because it's like the Bible, Shakespeare, these are the most known books ever. How did the Bible get the monopoly on having every a copy in every hotel room? That is like what?
Yeah.
Should have been Man Magazine.
Would have at least somebody would have read it then.
Me and you would have. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Well, the first thing I worry about is my cat comfortable between my ankles? Because the
Oh,
cat, because I like to sleep on my side, but you can't sleep on your side if the cat's in between your legs. So that's number one. I try not to worry. I have one of those brains that's constantly going, so I try and think about things that kind of shut out most of the din that's going on in there. If I'm working on a particular script, lines will come to me, and sometimes I worry I will get too many lines, so I won't be able to remember them in the morning. So then I have to get up and I have to put the line on. I have to write them down, and then by the time I got to lie down again, I'm not tired. So it's ruined my whole thing. But at least I've got a few lines to help me get started in the morning. But you worry about it. It's situational again. If I'm going in, I had to go in for a minor operation, but I'm a complete child. So I going to bed, I worried about that for like 6 weeks in a row. I'm just not very, I'm not very adept at dealing with the real world. That's why I
Darrell,
write.
how would you differentiate between worry and concern? Is there a fine line, or
Well, I think worry is, I worry about my cats, I worry about my daughter, I worry about my health. I am a worrier. I worry about all kinds of things. I think concern to me is I have concern for the environment. I have concern for democracy. I think there's a lot more information and a lot more thought goes into concern as opposed to, you can just worry, the little dot on your hand. Oh, I'm worried that that's so and so, or your finger's shaking. Have I got Alzheimer's? Have I got whatever?
yeah,
I think worry is a lot more instantaneous or situational. Where concern is a it's I think it's the difference maybe between climate and weather.
yeah,
That would
that's
be I think closer.
that's good. My friend lost his keys today, and I said, if you lose your keys, that's human, not that bad. But if you look at your keys and go, what are these for? Then you might have Alzheimer's. And then I told him my favorite Alzheimer's joke. The guy goes to the doctor, says something's wrong, and he analyzes him, and he says, well, you have Alzheimer's and cancer. And the guy goes, at least I don't have cancer.
Yeah, I have a friend, a comic, who tells a joke. He says the great thing about doing a routine before an Alzheimer's group is if they like a joke, you can tell it again. I think we've drifted off the PC thing here a little.
Yeah. Look, we're having fun. That's what people have to realize. Um, well, yeah, Abe Burrows. You guys might even know him. No,
I know the name.
James. His
Oh, Abe
dad,
Burrows. I worked on a show that he had done
right?
pilot of. Yeah, Abe Burrows is the big director, right? From
Yeah, well,
Broadway.
Abe wrote some funny songs,
Mhm.
and my wife sings one, and she was singing it at an Alzheimer's home, and it was the girl with the three blue eyes. And all of a sudden, one of the patients started singing the words along with her. And I mean, that was a real miracle. In
The brain
in
has, it's an unbelievably complex and unpredictable animal. It's
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Well, by definition, you can, because even if it was only last week and it's the first thing you can remember is your earliest memory.
Right.
So mine, and again, memories are, as we all know, they can be very, very tricky. It could be a false memory, but my earliest memory that I think I remember is my sister coming home from the hospital when she was born, and I was 3. That I believe I remember. I can picture the house. I can picture where I was sitting. on the couch and hearing the news that this new entity was coming into the house.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
For me, it certainly is both,
Yeah.
and memory is what, again, it's like the brain. It's one of those things that, I know you had Andrew on, and and Andrew's always impressive because he can just spew out quotes, paragraphs of lines of things that he remembers that he likes. And when he was writing his book, his memoirs, he didn't remember that we had spent our first 2.5 years on the Tonight Show on the second floor in these offices separated from everybody else. He thought we were in a bungalow. Now the bungalow is where Fred DeCordova stayed, and we had only been in that bungalow in the first 2.5 years, I think twice, maybe 3 times. But to his memory, when he was writing this book, that's where we were, even though we'd never been there, except for those 2 or 3 visits. I said, how could we be in a bungalow? We used to walk upstairs every day to go to work.
Now, that's in Burbank?
Yes, it was at the NBC studios in Burbank.
And you mean this book, Comedy Writer?
Could be that book, yes.
Yeah.
And he's written a couple of books on comedy writing. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this book
No, the first one I think was like How I Made $12 Million.
Oh, that's the
it's
first
in that
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this one is
about little details because he knows.
Yeah.
I seem to be able to, the dumber and the smaller and the more inconsequential the detail, the better I remember it for whatever reason.
Yeah, because this book is dedicated to you. So tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, sort of like a role model, and what specifically was that main impact?
I would say in the family would probably be my father. He was a writer, producer. He was relentlessly creative, and I wanted to be a writer from about the age of 10, and I'm guessing that's where it came from. And some of our first jobs, Andrew, my first jobs were working for my father. Outside the family, there've been a lot of people that have had big influences and turned corners for me. But I would say that without a doubt, meeting Andrew was number one. I'm a very flawed individual, and I would never have made it to any of those places to turn those corners without Andrew. I owe him everything.
It's a beautiful relationship you guys have had. Now, you said you started writing at age 10. Did you meet him before that?
No, I met Andrew, I think I was 12. So I've been writing a couple of years. We met in junior high, and initially there was a fake play that we put on, and we were given some details in the class, and I was the defense lawyer and he was the prosecuting lawyer. And not only did I lose the case, but I got 12 years for witness tampering, and the person who was guilty only got, I think, 7 years for the actual crime. So he was a pretty good prosecutor as well as a writer.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, I mean, my grandparents had a little bit of religion. My mother was brought up to be a Methodist. My father has a tiny bit of not conventional religion, but I think by the time, and I don't want this to sound insulting, but by about the same time I stopped believing in Santa Claus, I stopped believing in any kind of religion. I think it was kind of oh, this is what reality is. I've got a grasp of that now. These things can't be. So I think, probably grade 3, grade 4, I became an atheist, somewhere in there.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I would like him to give me a profound apology, and I would like him to promise that he would do better. I think Pee Wee Herman could have put together a better Earth and civilization than mankind, and an all-powerful being I've always I say this a lot, that if there was a God out there, I would want him to be a nicer guy than I am, because I know how flawed I am. But I would not do some of the horrible, horrible things that this supposed supreme being, would I give children cancer? No, I fucking wouldn't. Would I allow the Holocaust? No. Would I allow starving in Africa? No. I would build a better society, because how, if God can't build a better society, how are these lame brains walking around this planet supposed to do it? I mean, it's impossible. So yeah, do better next time. Fix this
That-
fucking thing.
you owe me an apology. That is a great line. But I skipped, do you pray?
Well, no.
I should have skipped,
Yeah,
but go ahead.
you hope, and I
Yeah,
think hope is what eventually kills you, because
yeah.
it's when hope dies that I think you're ready for the grave. I think you live in that hope until you realize it isn't there. It's like George Carlin had the "fuck hope" tour, and I can see exactly where he's coming from.
Darrell, can you forget to die?
Can you? I'd love to forget to die. I forget a lot of things, but yeah, I mean, it would be nice if you could die on your own terms, even that, you had a certain amount of time on Earth, and then you got to choose the way you wanted to go out. It would be nicer than probably, for most, but I can't remember who, a friend of mine always quotes there's somebody who says, "No life ends well." And I think that that is absolutely true. Maybe, it would be so nice to be one of those people and be, think, oh, what a shame. There's somebody's walking down the street. They fall, they have an aneurysm burst. They fall onto the ground and they're dead within seconds. That's the way to go. I mean, that's, you're shopping at Macy's and you're dead.
Yeah.
That would, rather than what most people end up in hospital or sick or, yeah, give me a quick out. That's what I want.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Is there universal evil? It would be my question. I mean,
Yeah.
a man or a woman walks into a cafe and explodes a bomb and kills women and children and babies and men. Most of us would think that was evil, but there are some very, very religious people who believe that person is a hero.
Yeah.
An army attacks a city unprovoked. Eventually, they break down the defenses, they march into the city, and they slaughter everybody. They slaughter babies in mothers' arms, and then they kill the mothers. Nobody survives. They kill everybody, regardless of whether they were enemies, whether they begged for mercy, or whatever. Religious people sing joyous songs in celebration of Jericho.
Yeah.
They think it's the most wonderful. Blow, Gabriel, blow. Let's get those walls down so we can start hacking away at those babies. So is there evil? The unspeakable. A lot of people think the unspeakable torture we put the animals through is evil, and yet other people line up to joyously bite into the murdered, shredded flesh of those poor animals. So, I think it's like beauty. Evil is in the mind of the beholder, because everybody has a different idea, and they are vastly different.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and you answered a question with a question, and that's what this is all about. So you win, Darrell. Bingo. Um, the hidden question there, or the follow-up question actually, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? So Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I could be, I'm a ridiculously self-defeatingly loyal person to people that I know. But if I get betrayed in any way or they fuck me over, I can become very cold. So I turn away and never look back. So that's the way I deal with it. Now, there are many kinds of enemies. There There are enemies that are trying, now that I'm semi-retired, I have much fewer enemies than I did when I was in show business full time. If an enemy was shooting bullets through my window, and that's a different kind of enemy. But luckily, we don't have many of those in the beaches in Toronto, so that doesn't come up. But yeah, I mean, mostly I ignore them. The more, yeah, because some people feed off that. People feed off that.
I agree. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think most lives are really boring. And you go to a theater and you see sections of life where they're better looking than you are, they're wittier than you are, they dance better than you do, they sing better than you do, they live in houses better than you do. It's You get to see life in a truncated thing with all the tedious bits cut out. So it's you can go there and you can look at somebody else's problems on a macro level, and it doesn't affect you. Whatever it is, when little Nell gets sick and dies, it isn't your child. You get to whatever that thing is. It doesn't affect you. You get to escape from your own life and see something that is far more interesting than real life. I do the same thing when I write. A lot of my, especially now that I'm not, chained to making a living all the time. I write things to escape. I write people that them go to places. I'm a very dull person, but I can travel to anywhere I want. I can have sex with beautiful women in my writing, or I can have women have sex with each other, which I like a lot. I can do things I can manipulate reality in my writing to entertain myself. So I guess that's very similar to going to a play, only I create it myself. I don't have to go and have. I'm not at the will of somebody else, because I've seen some real stinkers out there. So you don't always come back home after watching something. You go, well, that was a good 2 hours.
Yeah, my friend saw David Lynch's Blue Velvet and said, "Yeah, I guess it's a good movie, but I don't want to spend 2 hours of my life with those people."
Well, you wouldn't want to live there, but I actually quite like that movie, and it
Yeah,
does have a point.
yeah,
There's a point to that movie. I don't like all of David Lynch's movies, but Blue Velvet I've seen a number of times, and
yeah.
it's an enjoyable ride.
Very cool. So, you've sort of told us, your dad's a writer. Yeah, I mean, I imagine you grew up a reader because did you grow up reading books because your parents were reading? They told you to read or on your own?
I'm mostly reading for my, I started with comic books. I used to, in Britain, used to have these weekly comic books that came out, Dandy and Beano and TV 21 and Bunter, and there's a million of them, and I would read those just cover to cover and reread them. Yeah, I think probably, yeah. I was never very good at reading assignments in school. I basically floated through school, and I maybe finished reading. I think Day of the Triffids. No, no, not Day of the Triffids. The other one.
Lord of the Flies?
No, it's by the same author.
Oh, oh, sci-fi.
It's a sci-fi. It's about mutation, and they kill.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
No, I'll think of it later and go, of course,
Yeah,
that's what it is. And I
it's
read effects of the gamma rays on the moon, marigolds, or whatever. I think those are the only two books I ever finished. Most of the rest of the things I would just float through and try, and I
right.
just couldn't read. I was more into history and biographies, and I still am. I
Yeah.
tend to read more of that than there are. I have a real weakness for Wodehouse. I have read some of them. Code of the Worcesters I've read probably 6 times. I just
Wow.
certain, yeah. Well, there are certain fictional things that I really like. Uh, but mostly I read. I would say factual material.
But when's that tipping point? Is it at 12 when you're first meeting Andrew? Like, oh, I want to pursue being a writer. So that's, the trade is putting words on paper, right? So
Yeah,
is that pretty much the tipping point once you started selling to that one guy? And
I think. Well, We started out as we didn't really write a ton to begin with. It was mostly we wanted to be rock musicians.
I
So
see.
yeah,
That's
we started out as songwriters for the first from grade 12 to I think around no grade to since we were 12 to about 16, 17. And then when we became very influenced by Monty Python.
oh, Monty Python.
We wrote a book together called This in No Way Resembles the Dirty Version of Grade 13 Physics, which was basically Python sketches in a very crude way. That was kind of our switch over, and for a number of years we bounced back and forth between music and comedy. But in those days, music cost a lot of money, and comedy was basically free if you had a typewriter. So that's where we gravitated eventually when you didn't have to buy speakers and home studios and things like that. Now, it would have been a different thing because everything's so cheap. You can have a 24 track studio in your house. And if you can play the keyboards, which Andrew can, and microphones and things, everything's cheap now. I mean, back in the day, a 4 track that Andrew got was like, I don't know, it was like $1,800 or something,
Yeah.
which is probably $10,000 now. I mean, it's just where, for the price of a computer, you can have a whole studio in there. So, yeah, hard to say now whether we would have
Right.
gravitated so much to comedy, but we did it because of economics.
Who were the lyricists that were perking your ears, like that had an impact on you? Was it poetry or lyricist or any influences in that regard?
I think Andrew's probably more into poetry than I am. I was certainly guys like John Cooper Clarke. Beasley Street to me is the finest rap song ever written. I mean, it's just a piece of genius. Where I don't know if you know the song, but it's basically describing these working class slums in England, where he says the rats have all got rickets and spit through broken teeth. The name of the game's not cricket. Caught out on Beasley Street. It's just full of this imagery of that's. It's just unbelievably. You should read it. You'd really like it. But Tom Waits, I was attracted to, of course, Randy Newman. I think the poetry of Dave Cousins of the Strawbs is very strong. It can be songs about hate. It can be songs about love. It can be songs about sadness. But if they're put together well, that some of that stuff you read it and it is poetry. It's just there's just some and then you can also like some idiot stuff like Oasis. If it's got a good tune, then you put up with things about going down the hall like a bowling ball. So it's
Yeah. So a screenwriting teacher told me great artists when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art, great film, when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing? I mean, you can differentiate it, but I mean, you're mainly a comedy writer. Would you
well, yeah.
say?
My intent is to make people laugh. It's a little different than say a drama or something. I mean, the intention of a big action film is to have people jumping in their seats. I want to make people laugh. I mean, you obviously need a story if it's longer than a joke. But to me, the most important thing in comedies is laughter, which is not a universal belief, because there are a lot of people out there, and unfortunately, they're running the studios and things that laughter in a comedy is secondary to other things. It's just it's kind of like the bastard child in the United States, I believe, and in Canada too. In North America, I think it's far more the ability to make somebody laugh is far more revered in places like England than it is in a place like North America, where every they treat every comedy they're so predictable that it's basically ha ha ha, than a big piece of treacle. Like it becomes the sugar for the sour tasting medicine that you know is going to come near the end of the thing, where you get some stupid homily and people realize that they were wrong all along and they should have been themselves, and all this, cheap, easy crap. I mean, it's easy to make somebody cry. I can write something in 10 seconds to make somebody cry, but it's really hard to make them laugh. And, I think that's probably why a lot of comedies, kind of, well, it's situational. We don't need jokes. We want to laugh from coming from the character, which means I couldn't write a joke if you put a gun to my head. So, it's an easy out.
Yeah,
If I go to see a comedy, I want you to make me laugh. If
yeah.
I'm not laughing and it's supposedly a comedy, go fuck yourself. I watched oh god, what's the one with Emma Thompson where she hires this sex worker.
The new Emma Thompson, yeah.
Yeah, and it was presented in the commercials as a comedy. There's not a smile in that thing. Even
Wow.
my sister, who liked the movie, I hated it, but my sister liked it. But even she said she was surprised because when she saw the trailer, she was expecting a comedy, and it was not funny whatsoever.
Wow.
It wasn't unbelievably sad every second, which for some people, I guess, is comedy, but it's just pointless.
Really good, Darrell. I appreciate it. You named Monty Python. Who else was making you laugh or influencing your sense of humor early on then? Or, throughout? I mean, just
Yeah, I mean, early on, I mean, because I was born in Britain and my parents used to watch a lot of British television. Um, there would be, even as cheap as Benny Hill and on the buses.
yeah,
When you're a kid, you'll laugh at that stuff because it's
yeah.
it's very easy to grasp what's going on. Yeah, some of those cheaper things, and then you would move up to The Manor Born or Good Neighbors. I liked. Faulty Towers to me is the funniest sitcom ever written. We should all aspire to be that funny. And there's one that's unapologetically funny. There's almost no, you know, moments of sadness in that. But comedy is underlying. There's a great deal of sadness. I mean, one of the great, I think, comedies of all time was probably Steptoe and Son, which was a British comedy about a guy, the mean, filthy, dirty, selfish, grotesque old man and his son. And all his son wanted to do was better himself. And his father would drag him down. Every time he tried to lift himself out of that hole, he'd be pulled down by his father. And it was mostly two people. I mean, it was Sanford and Son is the North American version, which was not nearly as good. But there was, if you look beyond the humor of Sanford and Son, there's a unbelievably uh, sad underpinning to that whole show. But when you're a kid, you don't see it. But but I think I don't think you have to be sad. I think if you look at Python, and something like the Goon Show, it's funny for funny that there isn't that sadness in it. Though people laugh at people getting hit in the head with a hammer or a 60-ton weight. There's something about mankind that finds the suffering of others incredibly funny, especially if it's done on a cartoon level. Where it's funny how you can have people hurt beyond measure in one circumstance and people laugh at it, and another they cry. It's like the Bible, I guess. It's the way you interpret that action. um, we're a funny breed, really.
Yeah, it's funny because just what you said reminded me of slapstick. And you could go like, Buster Keaton knew that he could possibly hurt himself, but he wasn't out there to hurt himself per se. He was more like a gymnast in doing things
Yeah.
pratfalls. This is pratfalls because I just want to do this through line for you and tell me what you think. Then you go to Chris Burden, California artist, became huge in the 70s because he had himself shot with a gun in his arm, and that was his art piece. And he was named by Esquire magazine as a great new artist, and then he taught at UCLA, and he is an important artist. But in the bottom line, you don't want to hurt yourself and call it art.
I
But
think
he,
I think getting Sharpie stains on my clothes is probably as much as I've suffered from my art.
but the third one in this line, my pratfalls theory is sort of a bullshit theory, is Jackass. These
Mhm.
guys are huge and they know they're going to hurt themselves, and you're going to kick back a bunch of money for them. And it's like, what's the point? So, what's the, I don't know what the question is, but what's the function, or can you talk about pratfalls and slapstick?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really watch a lot of that because it is real. I mean, there's a difference between something that looks real and you know it's not, that you can laugh at, and something, there are things, on YouTube where a friend of mine wrote and produced funniest home videos for
Yeah,
a million years.
yeah,
And he said there were things that people would send in where they really killed themselves
yeah,
to, because and they never put any of that stuff on because it was just ridiculous. People would just, unbelievable, just to get on television, would injure themselves. But there's it's the Charlie Chaplin thing where he says, it's the banana. You show the man, you show the banana, you show the man, you show the banana skin, you show the man, he's getting close to the banana skin. You show the man, he walks straight past the banana skin and falls down a manhole. That's the comedy. It's that unexpected thing. There's a piece in a movie, and I'm trying to remember what the movie was called. It's about these guys who go to Mexico before they have to go to the war, and they go to pick up a bottle of Dom Perignon and drink it. And at one point, they're trying to get there, and they're trying to figure out how to get there. So what they come up with is this train is going to come by, and they've got a car with no gas, and they hook the bumper up to this big chain, and it's a pilot chain, and the chain is going to hook onto the train. So the train goes by, and the train hooks the chain, and the chain's unraveling. And one of them says to the other, he says, "When we get to where we want to go, how are we going to stop?" At that point, the train yanks the bumper out the car and just goes and just takes it into the distance. And I laughed a bucket at that. It's just that unexpected. It's
right.
it's slapstick, but it's not what you expect. You have to surprise somebody. And I think that's maybe part of the problem for me with Jackass
Yeah.
is what's coming. If they do something insane like they were doing these seesaws in a bull ring, well, somebody's going to get really gored by that bull. But
Uh,
it's those slapstick moments you don't see coming. I think that to me are the funny ones, the unexpected.
I like that. What's the function of laughter?
I think to probably stop your head from exploding. I think it really does it lets out the pressure. I mean, we've discussed how horrible life is. I think it's probably some sort of psychotic way that because we do laugh at, so again, people injuring themselves and all kinds of horrible things that happen to other people, we're hysterical at. And I think it's probably just a cathartic, necessary uh, movement in the brain that just says, "Fuck it, we just need to let some of this pressure out, or we're gonna pop. We're gonna go up like a Spinal Tap drummer here." So I think that's what it is. I think it's just a way of dealing with the horrors of everyday life. Is the ability to lower its seriousness, in a way, because we do sometimes laugh at very serious things, but I think it helps us deal on a level that if we just took everything seriously, I mean, even in a good suspense movie, occasionally they will have funny moments to let the pressure out and then build it back up.
Yeah.
Because if it's relentless, it just becomes unbearable. I think it's just some sort of safety valve we have. And
Yeah.
luckily so, because I'd be out of a job if it wasn't for that
But
need.
you describe dynamics well. So yeah, Gurdjieff says, the Sufi guy said, the function of laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no, and I love it because Alfred E. Newman of Mad Magazine said, English is the only language where a double negative is a no-no. So this thing about satire, because I think it was fun, we grew up with, that was the week that was, and then you have fake news and you have satire news. And there's another Steve Allen line that Marshall McLuhan loved to quote, is behind every joke, there's a grievance. Any comment on that?
Well, certainly behind a lot of jokes, and as Steve got older, he became more and more had more and more grievances. Um, well, in a lot of ways, there is. I don't think in every joke. I mean, again, I think humor with the pythons and there are things nowadays where you just say certain things, and they are unbelievably silly. Now, there was a joke, one of my favorite jokes on the Tonight Show, written by a couple of old guys. I mean, they were probably 30 years older than us, and they didn't write a lot of wild jokes. But during the Great Poupon craze, Johnny came out and said, LA's a strange town. He says, I was coming into work today and somebody pulled up next to me in a Winnebago. And he rolled down the window and I rolled down the window. And he says, hey, have you got any Benjamin Moore? My wife wants to paint the kitchen. Now, I thought that was a funny, funny joke. Is there a grievance behind that joke? Maybe you don't like the Great Poupon commercial because you think it's shallow or something, maybe. But on another level, it's just a strange connection that you make. And
Right.
there are those jokes, I think, that, I mean, Andrew was always trying to do math jokes. And I kept warning him, and they almost never play because while people are thinking of working out the math, by the time they've got to the answer you need, they've forgotten what the joke was. But I think there are jokes, a lot of jokes. It's easy to do grievance jokes because if you're pissed off at something and the audience is pissed off at something, they're just with you. Whatever that thing is, they're going to laugh. But I think there are other kinds of jokes that we used to do that, just plain silly. Yeah. Or there's a connection you make that makes you feel smart and you laugh. I think there are those jokes as well.
Yeah, it's really good. It sort of brings up this thing they tackled in the new George Carlin documentary. And at the end of his career, not even the end, people would say he's too bitter, and George's brother and
I love Pat. I was a good friend of Pat's.
Pat talked about it. He wasn't bitter. So they sort of defend George.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is about this. Well, let's go into satire first, because
speaking of there's a grievance. I was thinking today about an old joke about there's a guy in Ireland and he's dying in his bed and his family are around and they say, do you have any last requests? Because he doesn't have long. And he says, yeah, can you bring a priest? He says, I want to convert. And they're stunned. They can't believe it. But, it's his last request. They go out and they get a priest and he comes in and he performs the service and then the priest leaves and they go up and says, so I don't understand. I said, you've converted. He says, you've hated Catholics your entire life. I says, yes. And in another hour or so, another one of the bastards will be dead.
Well, I used to ask the question, can satire be destructive? I'm just going to suss this out, the big picture. So most people go, yeah, it could be destructive because if you do a cartoon in a certain, people think being dead is bad or destructive. But David Mish, who's written for Mork and Mindy and a book on how to, funny book, history of comedy and comedy techniques, he says the job of satire is to be destructive. Now, again, it's this wordage, just like you took the word every out of this Steve Allen. I have troubles with that too. Behind jokes are grievances would been, more probably a better way to say it, but he said every. So Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. So I mean, you can tackle it. Can satire be destructive in this bitterness sensibility, or just why satire? I don't have the answer, the question I really want to word, but I think there's enough maybe you could go off on.
Well, I mean, satire that people laugh at, I think, is almost a social equivalent of slapstick. It's watching somebody else, run crotch first into a water cooler. Only it's when you looked at something like the what was it the aristocrats, where they had the games on the Python, where they were all these incredibly stupid inbred toffs, and they were trying to do the simplest things. They were trying to shoot a rabbit, and then they would cut people's heads off by accident. And it was basically saying, why do we have this society which is full of these fucking idiots who just are born into these places and are inbred because aristocrats don't want to mate with anybody but their own kind, and it's a very small club. Satire, I think, is a great place in society, mostly when it's shooting up. Obviously, I mean, it's to take it, to take shots at the powerful and governments and things like that, and show the foibles and the selfishness and the stupidity and the lack of logic in things that people are trying to try and dump on the rest of us. And it's not quite as palatable when you're satirizing the lower classes. I mean, Dumb and Dumber, you could that's a satire on stupid people. But if they were even dumber than that, if you could never do a satire, say, on people who are mentally challenged, because and there's certainly on a comedic, on a purely scientific method, there's a lot to lampoon there, but you don't do it because it's just I don't think would be funny, because it would be appalling. But more's changed. I mean, back in the early the Village Idiot and things like that. We have I think probably we've gone overboard in protecting people these days, because PC, I think, is really put a dent in what we can talk about and what we can satirize. The many things that we used to be able to satirize, some for good, some for bad. I mean, I'm not, there are certain subjects which used to be allowed, which are not allowed today, and that is a terrific, I think, is a terrific development. But there are things, I think, where we have overstepped that line, and people will drag you over the coals for the littlest thing. I mean, there are jokes that Johnny was considered Mr. America, Mr. Midwest. There were jokes we told that would be unacceptable today.
Yep.
We didn't mean anything by them. It was just the time, and we would tell those jokes. But if somebody else tried to tell those jokes today, there would be all kinds of people calling for the cancellation of the show.
And you led perfectly into this, because I had this theory, the reason they put a bar on every corner in America is to distract everybody so they drink beer and watch sports, and then they could pull the wool over their eyes. And then it's like, no, because guys would end up in bars and talk politics too, and talk, and then Carson would talk a few political things. He would talk about the current day situation sometimes, but then it developed. Oh, no, I have to go back, because one thing you said I love is Paul Krasner said, I take sacred cows and make hamburgers out of them. But sorry to interrupt, but it's like, now this thing developed from whatever, that was the week that was, into Harry Shearer, and he was calling it fake news, which was called satire news. And now fake news is a whole different thing than satire news. But you got a lot of people learning their news from Saturday Night Live or from Colbert. So what's called now satire news, does it more activate or more pacify people?
I think it actually, people did get their news from Johnny, and because he did do political jokes and he did talk about the world. I mean, there were certain things he wouldn't touch, and I think most of those sacred cows that Johnny wouldn't touch, everybody touches now. I mean, there are just subjects that now that Johnny wouldn't have gone near in a million years. What I think people do, younger people especially, do get a lot of news from the satire, and maybe it shapes their opinion.
Yeah.
It hasn't saved us from some of the dreadful leaders that we've elected or possibly elected in the last decade or so. But no, I think there is a function there. But yeah, I think without some of these people, yeah, because without the Daily Show and without Colbert and without all those people, I think a lot of young people just wouldn't have. People don't watch broadcast television anymore. They don't,
No.
we used to watch Walter Cronkite and people like that, and I'm certainly dating myself with that one. But it was something people did. You watch the news. I don't think people watch the news that way. Now, you can watch Fox or you can watch MSNBC or you can watch CNN, and it's 24-hour news, but it's not news the way it was presented. When Cronkite or any of those guys presented the news, it was relatively uh, unshaded, uncolored.
Yeah.
And when you go on to no, even I think the ones that try, and it's mostly commentators now and opinion people. So when you're talking about a subject, you're getting people's opinion on the subject, where Walter never gave you his opinion. He just read what was going on. This is what was passed today. This is what was done today. Somebody bombed here. These people are dead. You didn't get into a lot of just the pontificating that you get. So I think there's a real place now for entertainment news.
Yeah.
Because at least as opposed to Fox, when you go and see Colbert, they're not making up the news. They're just commenting and giving a funny angle on things that have actually happened.
Darrell, when you wrote for Carson, how much did you think of your audience when you were writing? Like Duchamp said, there's no art without an audience. How much did you and Andrew actually think of the audience while you were writing the joke?
While we were writing the joke, probably not at all, because we had an audience of one, and that was Johnny. If Johnny didn't like the joke, it didn't matter what the audience would have thought of that joke. It had to get by Johnny. So we even, and I'll admit this now, we would write jokes. Johnny had a weakness for whimsy. Audiences as a whole do not have any weakness for whimsy, and we would do the odd thing that was just whimsical. And he would go out and do them because he would laugh at himself and they would bomb. And, when we were standing backstage, we really wanted that audience to laugh at those jokes. But Johnny had to choose them first. So that, we had one person we had to please, and that was Johnny.
And your career with Andrew's been massive for many years. Tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that changed.
I think our arguing stayed the same. Andrew and I argued bitterly for, well, it would be what would it be now? It would be about 50 years. Um, yeah, we would have big knockdown, drag out fights over things. I remember when we were on sitcoms, we were running sitcoms, and the co-producer below us would have to go to the other writer and say, "Don't worry, mommy and daddy aren't fighting. They're just hammering out an idea." And yeah, no, we would. Oh, at my house. I mean, my daughter grew up listening to Andrew and I argue. Yeah, we just had, we have very. I think what made our partnership such a success was we were such different people. I mean, I've already explained our memory differences. He would, me
Yeah.
with specifics and him with, and our interests were different. I liked sports a little. I like, geography, and I liked history. And Andrew was, he was big into literature and things. So when we had all these disparate things, so when we needed to draw on one or the other of them, uh, we could bring this stuff together. And Andrew once described the differences of the way we write. Is Andrew will get he it's almost like a mathematical equation for him, that he will get a sentence and he will know what he wants to say, and he will put words in like they're additions or subtractions, and again shape the sentence until it comes out to be what he wants. So where I think he was a little jealous of this. He said, with me, lines just drop out of the skies and land in my head. And that's really the, yeah, that's the way I work. And, I'm almost worried as I get older because, you can still work out mathematically, you can work out jokes, but maybe one day things won't drop out of the heavens into my head and I won't be funny anymore. So
That was really well put, but that's basically what stayed the same. What's in 50 years, what's one thing that changed? One sort of major element.
well, I think probably I was more social when we were younger, and Andrew was very uh, difficult, socially awkward. And I think as the years have gone by, I'm terribly socially awkward. Now Andrew's just a social butterfly. Now that he's met Janet Fitch, and they socialize all the time. I often say to Judith, that my wife, that I would blow my head off if I had to go and to two or three parties a weekend or whatever, or they do so many things, and it's exciting stuff, and he loves it, and he loves to talk to people, and I get into a room with two or three people I don't know, and it's like you know
Yeah.
it's it's like I'm going for a high colonic. It's just not an enjoyable experience for me.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
As Andrew and I were both people of conviction who had a hard time compromising, I don't know. I wish, part of what Andrew has often said is that because we started so young, uh, that we're basically brothers, really. I mean, I've known Andrew since I was 12, something like that, and we've been working together since, as partners, songwriting, and since we were 12. That we never had to be polite to one another. And when we met, and we didn't meet any comedy writers until we hit LA, which was well into our, we've been writing comedy for about 15 years by that time. And when, group people were put together, teams were put together, and they didn't know each other that well. And they would be afraid to say, that's not a good joke. We don't, that's never going to work. They would put things into the scripts as a compromise because they didn't want to offend the other person. They didn't want to get into a big brouhaha. They didn't want the chance of this partnership splitting up. For some reason, Andrew and I, no matter, I mean, we got into some big knockout, drag out fights, but we were never afraid for some reason that would split up I mean, I can remember us writing in separate rooms a couple of times, but we would never, think, oh, well, that's the end of our partnership. We were never afraid to not be polite to each other. So I think that did help our comedy because we were so uncompromising with one another that the jokes went by the wayside, and we would sit there and grumble until we came up with a third alternative better joke than one he had and the one I had.
It's beautiful. So, these three elements, how would you rate them in contributing to your success and your accomplishments? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Boy, it's a combination of it's and I've written I've been writing my memoirs for a couple of years now, and I don't know, I've got like 100,000 words or something. But if I go through it and see what it really is, just a combination. I don't know whether you have to have all three, really. I mean, you can be the most talented writer in the world and not make it because you have to have the right personality. You have to be able to just. And I think, and I certainly have a lot of flaws that way. That probably we could have been even more successful than they were because we are. And, I'll say, well, Andrew and I are really, really talented comedy writers, and but you have to go through a lot of shit. You have to basically you're in a business where nobody wants you. So we start writing. We wrote for years. We worked for my father, who basically sort of wanted us, maybe. And we worked for all kinds of things. We're waiting for those breaks, and the breaks came. But when the breaks did come, we had to have the talent to take advantage of that break. And the first one was when Alan Thicke's mother was cutting out a piece in the paper about comedy writers, and she used to do these things for Alan. And there was a piece about the comedy bank which we were writing for, and there was, I don't know, 15, 20 writers in the comedy bank. And he asked the guy who was running it, Graham Haley, to send some examples, to have him us write jokes and send them in to Alan for him to look at. Now that's luck right there, big piece of luck. Andrew and I were the two out of the 20 that he picked, and he ended up inviting us down to LA, and then inviting us down to work on his show a year later after that. So it was luck and it was talent, and it was sticking with it until that break came. And then I got a phone call one day. Mickey Rooney's writer had just died, and he was looking for another writer. And the next thing I knew, I was on the phone with Mickey Rooney, and he asked us to write some stuff for his Sugar Babies. We wrote the stuff. He loved it. Now, if just having the lucky break wasn't enough. You had to have the talent behind that. We knew the kind of stuff that Mickey wanted. We wrote to what he wanted, and he loved that. And we wrote for Mickey for about 10 years. And wow. The same when we got lucky with our manager who knew somebody on the Tonight Show. There was an opening on the Tonight Show. We sent our material, and everybody in town sent their material into the Tonight Show. We got picked. So, you had to have the talent at that moment because it certainly wasn't our personalities. I mean, we were so nervous when we went in for our interview with Johnny. We took our manager with us, which was completely unheard of, but we just couldn't face him alone. We were like 26, I think, maybe 28 and 27, I think. And we had to go in and meet Johnny Carson, who we had idolized as children. And he'd been on television since the time I landed into Canada. So just facing him alone just seemed impossible. Yeah. So we must have come off like bumpkins bringing our manager in to this meeting, and they still hired us because we were the ones who had, and then became head writers of the show after that. So
yeah, you sussed it out great. Going through all three. And I used to ask the question, is ambition based more on fear or joy? But then I read William Friedkin, and he said, skill and luck have nothing to do with anything in Hollywood. It's all ambition, which I don't know if it's true. Go ahead if you want to comment.
You need a lot of ambition. I mean, I know there are a lot of guys I know really, really talented writers who aren't working, and I know mediocre hacks who are multimillionaires.
Yeah.
And, the studios and the networks, they aren't very creative people. They don't recognize talent. They're, if somebody can go in and talk a good game, I mean, that's the one thing I think if Andrew and I had something that we could lump on top of what we have is that ability to smile and eat shit would be a really, really good thing, which we never, in 40, 50 years in LA, we never managed to just be able to do that. I mean, some of these guys would get on the phone and they would pontificate and they would just hacks. Yet they would sound like they were giving some real thought to something when they were just stating things that had been said a billion times much better by other people who actually had a soupçon of talent.
Yeah, I like Frank Zappa said on David Letterman, I don't have any brown lipstick in my makeup kit.
Yeah.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
A weakness? I certainly have a lot of weaknesses that I turned into a strength. I think most of my weaknesses just got weaker. I don't know. I turned into a strength. I've mostly done the other. I've I've made up for my weaknesses by trying to limit them. I don't know if I've ever made a weakness a strength. If I sit down and write something later, I may be able to think of something, but that would be a tough one for me. I think Andrew, as I said, I think he used to be very awkward socially, and I think it's an absolute strength of his now. I think he has done that. I don't think I have developed as much as a human being as I probably wished I would have in my time on this earth. So I may have failed on that one.
There's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into, "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this idea, I'm not saying you, Darrell, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that idea? You create what you resist.
Well, again, when you're in television, you do it all the time. I mean, I've written things I hated. I've written things I didn't believe in. When I was on the Tonight Show, you would write jokes slamming politicians you desperately hope were going to get elected and save the country and save the world, but it was your job to go after them. So yes, it's part of that. It's like Neil Simon said, I could hear my mother died and put down the phone and write something funny. When your job is to, I guess it's like a hired assassin. You don't question who that person is. You just shoot them. That was what it was like in television. Boy, I mean, this crap. I mean, there are some things I wrote that I'm terribly proud of. There was things on the Tonight Show. I've done a few shows that I really, really like, but I've written some garbage and things that I absolutely know were wrong. And that was the job.
But yeah, that's sort of what James Joyce did with Finian's Wake. That's the human condition. You fall, then you get back up. You didn't fall and then say I quit. You fell and got back up.
No, I had a child to put through private school. I had to get back up. Yeah. I mean, it's there's a huge difference between being a professional writer and being somebody who writes. And when you're in the profession and that's where you make all your money, again, you talk about compromises. Yeah, there are things that you have to do, jobs that you take. Everybody takes jobs they don't like because you don't like maybe slinging burgers or Burger King, but if you need that job at that particular moment, that's the job you take because you have a family, you need to eat. It's just the same when you're a writer. There are things that come along that you take that you happen to need at that moment. Sometimes, you land the dream job of a lifetime. When Andrew and I were writing for George Carlin the first time, when we got brought in, like out of nowhere as a couple of young kids to basically help him shape his pilot for HBO. I mean, it was a dream come true. I mean, it was beyond a dream come true. I still have hard times thinking back on it and saying, "Wow, that really happened." But there are times when you're writing the Noonbury Secret Seven or whatever it was fucking called, where I didn't even understand. There was a show that was so untethered by reality and I think we wrote 5 or 6 episodes of this thing that I could never visualize it. And it was one of the hardest things I'd ever written because we would be writing these words down and Andrew would be typing and okay, he goes to this rock, but we really had no concept of this world or what drove these creatures. And it was like the secret or the sacred five, except there were seven of them. It mathematically didn't even make sense. It was an odd show where I've written things I didn't even understand.
Wow. Darrell, I asked for 90 minutes. It's 90 minutes. Can we go a little longer? Are you okay?
Sure. No, nobody listens to me, so this is a unique experience.
Dude, I'm really learning a lot and I'm having a lot of fun. So a few more. How do you find peace of mind?
I used to say, and it's still true, most most writers, professional writers who've been in the business a while, really don't write. They don't like writing. They write for a paycheck. And I certainly did enough of that. But I like writing, where most of my contemporaries don't. If there's not a paycheck, I know people will go years without writing anything because I guess it's just been beaten out of them. But I used to say that when we started writing a script, Andrew and I would start writing a script. It was like being in the womb, because it's the one. I'm not very good at anything except I'm a really good writer. So, I can't paint a door, I can't fix a shelf, but I can write something, and it will. I know at the end it will be really, really good. And that gave me peace of mind. I was actually in an element what I could control, and I felt good about it because inside a script, I was, yeah, it was like literally being in the womb. It gave me peace of mind because it was something I knew that I knew how to do.
Well, I think you must know how to buy records
Yeah, no,
and be an appreciative audience of music. So let's do one music question because I promised it 80 minutes ago. My friend my friend says the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. Technique, you can learn how to play it. Theory is what you're doing, chords or whatever structure. In taste, how does one acquire taste in music?
I listened to obviously a lot of music, and Andrew and I started out as songwriters. Um, Again, you have to be a really good musician. My daughter, the genius, would argue with me on this, but uh, I think you have to be born with that sense of rhythm. Andrew can pick up any instrument and play it. You know, I just don't have a good sense of rhythm. It helped when he writes poetry. It's perfectly parsed. He's a wonderful poet. I'm not a wonderful poet. I play guitar, but I don't. He can play with bands, and he just can pick up any instrument. He's just born with that talent. Uh, Taste, I guess there's a difference between taste and creativity, because there are a lot of brilliant guitarists who have really great taste when they're playing, but can't write songs. That's where I separate something. To separate the great, and you can love a great singer and or a great musician, but if they don't write their own songs, there is one element that's missing from that piece. And and again, if you're a great songwriter, you don't need to play well. There are plenty of guys who don't sing. Tom Waits doesn't sing well. There are Irving Berlin could hardly play the piano, but it doesn't. You can be a great artist without technique, without a sense of rhythm, if you just have that creative spark. And whether you have taste or not, I don't know. I guess taste is, you can do things that don't have a lot of taste that still are popular. I mean, there are some pretty out there things that people gravitate to that you say were in bad taste. So I don't. Yeah, to me, I creativity is for first because I'm a creative guy. I can't play the guitar very well. So yeah. So obviously, from a subjective point of view, that's what I value the most. But when I listen to records, it's what I like. I don't try and intellectualize. It can be bad playing, but if it gives me a feeling, Neil Young, not a good singer. Lou Reed, there are a lot of singers I really, really like that aren't good singers. And I've said, I think the difference between, Young and a Lou Reed and a Tom Waits, when they're singing, say, a sad song, it has more gravity, because when Dean Martin or when a great singer with perfect pitch and that beautiful voice sings that great song, he sings it effortlessly. When Neil Young sings it, he struggles. And that struggle adds to the sadness. It adds to the passion of that song. When he's talking about whatever, when he's reaching for that note and having a hard time, to me, it adds more weight to what I'm hearing. It gives it more depth than just the gloss of somebody who's singing. Not that I don't love great singers, but it just adds a little extra for me.
I like that. Well put. And Darrell, can you tell me an instrumental song that makes you laugh?
Laugh. Ooh. Um, I tend to listen to, because I'm very uh, lyrically and oriented. I tend to not listen to many songs. You know, I don't know if there's any music that's really, you could say Spike Jones perhaps, but that's kind of
Yeah.
novelty, I suppose, or yakety sax or something silly like that would make me smile.
Yeah.
Actually laugh. I'm a hard laugh. There aren't a lot of things. And my daughter, she said when she grew up, but 'cause she grew up around a lot of some of the best comedy writers in the world, and she said the one thing she noticed is that when something funny was said by one of the comedy writers, most of the other comedy writers were like, "Yeah, that's really good."
And I've noticed that.
That you don't laugh out loud. I mean, the things that Andrew and I would laugh out loud at and on the Tonight Show, we would laugh out loud at things that didn't get a laugh with the audience.
Yeah.
That were There was one that got us into hysterics, which was a little known fact that Hitler, on the eve of the Battle of the Bulge, got on the intercom and lowed like a cow. Now, the entire writing staff, when we heard this, fell over. They thought this was, I don't know why, but things that we tend to laugh at aren't things that the general public laughs at. It's similar, I think, from what I've read, that connoisseurs of great wine, they said that if you drink, a 52 Rothschild, whatever the one of the great vintages of all time that these people rave about who drink wine for a living, you wouldn't like it because it would be foreign to your taste. It would taste sour to you. You wouldn't understand what they what they were tasting that was so good. And I think when you're with comedy writers whose whole life is lateral thinking and coming up with that different angle and turning that phrase, that what they laugh at is probably not uproariously, I'm talking about, I mean, just on the floor laughing, are not the things that probably a normal person who just watches television would laugh at.
Yeah. Again, well put. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't be such an opinionated asshole. Yeah, I think at times in my life, during my career, I said things that were true and honest, and I should have really just nodded my head and just gone along with what idiocy I was being told. I would be far far richer than I am if I'd have done that. Yeah, the ability to eat shit. Uh, it really I would have started myself early on trying to do that.
Wow. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a few
Oh
words.
dear.
Who started it all?
Who started it all? Oh man, I can't even give a quick answer on that one. Uh, I'm gonna have to pass on that one. I don't quite know that
That's
one.
that's all right. Number 2, are we going to make it?
No, absolutely not.
Where
No,
do we
I
put it?
think I think you can see now the seeds. And
Yeah.
it's like COVID. You look at COVID. When the next thing comes along, which is twice as bad as COVID, COVID was easy. You wore a mask and you stayed home and you tried not to infect people and try not to get infected. We couldn't do that. The
Yeah.
society cracked down the middle. We are doomed. We are stupid. We are selfish people who just cannot be taught, no matter how big the obvious lesson is. We refuse to accept it, and that will be our demise. The Republicans of this world are the Morlocks, and they will drag the Eloi into those bunkers and eat them.
Third, Alan Watts, where do we put it?
Well, I've been trying to figure that out with my record collection for 3 decades, and my wife would still like that answer. So, if we want it badly enough, we find space. That's really, really it. You find it somehow. You don't know where it is, but when that thing comes along you find space for it.
Fourth one, who's cleaning it up?
Well, I think that's why people strive, right? I think to be a success, the more successful you are, the less you have to clean it up. The richer you are, the more people clean it up for you. And I think cleaning up is never fun. I've got cats. We're cleaning up things all the time that, if I were a billionaire, I wouldn't be cleaning that stuff up. Somebody else would be. So it depends on how much money you got. The more money you have, the less you clean it up.
Yeah. Fifth Alan Watts question. Is it serious?
I don't think so. I think in the end, because I believe we are doomed, that really, again, well, like I said, being happy. It's to try and be happy until the end, because it's all a game. I mean, it's like it's like this whole thing with LGBTQ people banned from sports, and people just like getting bent out of shape and trying legislation and things. It's a fucking game. Who the fucking cares? People swim in water. Who cares who wins? You win a little medal, and by the time you're 50, you can hardly walk. It doesn't matter. There are really important things in the world like COVID, and people are going after these people, transsexuals, or people going to bathrooms. Who gives a shit where you take a piss? Fuck off. Get this. That's the reason why we're all going to die, is because people find something really easy to get pissed off about so they can avoid the really big, hard questions and that introspection.
I love it. Thank you, Darrell. This is really fun. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
I'm kind of an under guy, but I know a lot of people. I think my wife's an over person. So, again, it's a game. Who cares? We're all going to die.
Well, you should have seen, I was talking to this great poet once, and I got to that question, and he's going, how could you waste my time with that question? It's like, I have to have a little lightness in there. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Oh, no, I know the title. In fact, well, this is a cheat because I've been writing this thing. I was going to call it I'm Over Here, Mom. It was a joke I wrote, oh God, probably in my early 20s, which we sold to Joan Rivers. It's basically about Melissa. She says, I walked into Melissa's room the other day and she was masturbating. And I said, if you keep doing that, you're going to go blind. And she said, I'm over here, Mom.
That is
Yeah.
wait, you guys wrote that for Joan?
Yeah. And we got
That's
$10.
a great joke.
Yeah. And it's been stolen by other people. I've seen it. Gilbert Gottfried stole it I saw him do it on a show. And it's one of those jokes that has had a life of its own. So my autobiography will be called I'm Over Here, Mom.
I love that. And they want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What would the smell be?
If they were to scent the
glue in the binding of your book.
I would like it to smell like pheromones, so I would be more attractive to women.
Pheromones, I like.
They would smell it and go, I really would like to have that guy. That would be
never had that answer. That's very unique. Thank you. Darrell, if a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
A statue, well, hard to say who would want a statue of me. And where would it be displayed? I think I would like it to displayed in England somewhere. It's my favorite country in the world. Possibly, maybe in Babington where I grew up. It's a little tiny village which has been protected because it's in a green zone. There were a group of houses, and then there's a little grass thing where I used to play as a kid, which is right across the street. I think if the statue were there, that would probably be the place. What would it be made of?
Yep.
Well, hopefully it wouldn't be made of bullshit. I would make it out of something that would last, so I'd at least be there for a while. Something that wouldn't rot and despoil my already not exactly overwhelming looks.
Darrell, just a few more here. Tell me something good you never had and you never want?
Something good I never had and I would never want. Well, the the best liver and onions in the world I would never want. There are plenty of things I would never want. I think there are plenty of things to do good in. I think to be a leader. I don't think I'd ever want to be. I've been a showrunner. That's on a level that, but like a world leader or something. I think there are people who have done tremendous things. Who I would never want to be something like that. I would never want that kind of
Well,
power.
well, that's a good one. World leader I've never had. I usually get fame, money, and heroin. But I have a bonus question. You really stimulated me here, there, Darrell. If you were the you didn't want to be, but if you were the ruler of the world, what would you do on your first day?
On my first day. Well, everybody's benevolent on their first day. That's the problem. I think, Lenin was benevolent. And I think until like the second or third day when everybody in Parliament decided they wanted something different than he did, and then he dissolved Parliament. Everybody's like has all these great things. It's like Arendelle or whatever that elf is on Lord of the Rings, where she just tastes the power and she says she knew it would she would try to do it for good, but she realized it would eventually corrupt her and she would become evil because that's what power does. So she didn't want it. So on the first day, we can assume that it would be something great. I think probably I would set up I think universal health care. I'll go with something big that I think is one of the most important things. I would help. One of the things the U.S. still doesn't have and probably will never have, but the ability. I think people who are sick. I think it's getting them the treatment they need. That or food, of course. Starvation is the other big one that I, those are the kind of things that I would stress before I turned into a tyrant and started collecting a giant, harem of untouchable women for anybody else and start slaughtering my enemies. It would be benevolent things like
Yeah.
dispensing with hunger and giving people health.
Darrell, you're a good man. They asked Kinky Friedman if he got elected governor of Texas, what would he do on his first day? He said, no meetings. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, that's pretty well every day of my life in show business. So it's so I just keep writing jokes. Yeah, that's what I do.
Finally, someone gets that question. That's my life. The guy I learned that from was the ultimate Altacock who sat on Venice Boardwalk. He was like a Damon Runyon. He was just such a cool old dude who would just sit there. And he taught me that question. He says, it's like a metaphor for life. But a lot of people really hate me even asking that question. So I think, yeah, what would you do? Write a joke.
Yeah.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, there's not a lot that inspires me today, unfortunately. Cultural shift. Unfortunately, it's kind of bifurcating in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot more tolerance for certain things and a lot more intolerance for the same things. I think the fact that people can be openly gay and get married, and I'm not like some screaming liberal or anything. I just think, we should leave each other the fuck alone. I mean, to me, that's a very conservative point of view that, whatever I do is none of your fucking business. So it's, if gay people want to get married, it's none of my business. Whether I like it or not, it's none of my business. So there is a certain amount of those kind of things where, the cultural shift to accept interracial marriage and to, all of those things are good things to me. But unfortunately, there is this giant movement, and now partially led by the Supreme Court, it's going to be moving back into, and I'm talking about the United States here. I think, Canada and I think most of Europe are still moving forward, though there are, darker forces here and there. In Europe, there are problems with racial problems, ethnic, all kinds. Again, it's the more tolerant you are, the more it intolerance is stressful, and it prevents you from being happy, and it really doesn't accomplish much.
Yeah.
Just because you don't like gay people, they're still there. It's
Yeah.
not going to make you any happier that you hate them or you don't want that. You're trying to stop them from being married. So why not just do something that you actually like yourself? Nobody's asking you to be gay.
Yeah.
Just get on with your own fucking life and just enjoy yourself. That would be my cultural shift. That, yeah, I think there's people are allowed to be who they are more than they have been in chunks of society, and those are the chunks that I think that there's been a beneficial shift.
Really well put, Darrell. But I'm curious, where do you think you got that from? The way your parents raised you, or on your own?
I think it was, it's an evolution. I grew up in a small village, and then when I moved to Canada, boy, I don't think I went to school with anybody who was black until I was in high school, and then out of 1,400 students, there were maybe five, six, and that kind of thing, and really had never really, I found out a couple of my friends later were gay, but I didn't know anybody who was, because in those days you couldn't be outwardly gay. Uh, so it was, I think I was certainly considered myself when I was in high school to be a homophobe because I didn't know any gay people. It was this thing that people, talked about. I mean, everybody called each other. I'm going to say the F word here,
Yeah.
because yeah. But again, we didn't say the F word. We said the entire word back then, and we called every guy I knew called you the F word 17 times a day. People don't do that anymore. I was on a bus maybe about a year ago, and there were a bunch of kids. There were probably 12, 13, and they were arguing about something, and one of them called the other one the F word, and everybody else went ooh, and stopped the conversation. Now, in my day, you got that F word 20 times before you'd had lunch, so it wouldn't have had any effect. So it has changed, and I
Yeah.
think especially since I've been to LA, I know gay people, I know Jewish people, I know black. I, who cares? I think it's probably the isolation that we don't, that was really, I mean, when my great grandmother never moved more than probably 5, 6 miles from the village she was born in her entire life, and she lived to be 96. So it was easy to believe in witches and evil people of certain colors or religions or whatever in those days because you simply didn't interact with them. But I think in today's society, you know, Liberace's gay now. Noel Coward was gay, and look at the things they gave us. And your hair is cut by possibly a gay man, or this is again. I think that to me it's that, and of course we have the problems with that where you get a disease that's in the middle of China, and then everybody in the world's got it 10 minutes later. So it has an upside and it has a downside. But on a social level, I think it has helped the world a lot to
Yeah.
actually interact with one another.
Yeah. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession, art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You laid your cards on the table for over an hour and a half. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this. What's it really all about for you, Darrell?
I'm a lot different than say Andrew. Yeah, I've always said I have one talent, and that's writing. And for a lot of people, it's really tough to be a writer because it's hard, especially in the beginning. I mean, we worked for years and years making no money, and people choose occupations where they can do things and make more money. I never had that option. I was never going to be anything successful unless I was a writer. So I really had, there was only one road ahead for me that I could ever see. So, you know, Andrew could have done any number of things. He's a pretty good artist. He can play guitar. He's a good poet. He's a songwriter. He's got all kinds of little talents. I don't have any of those. So it really, life has been on some levels very, very easy for me because I could see that this was it for me. It was this or complete failure.
Yeah. Really been fun, Darrell. Last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
I'm not a terribly optimistic guy, as you probably glommed. Um, I think the thing that I don't know whether it's optimistic because optimism is like thinking things will turn out great, and I tend to be more realistic than that. Unless something has already happened, I don't think it's going to happen. That's good. Uh, I would say, you know, I have hopes. There are things you hope for, even guardedly, and I think all my hopes are very guarded.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I don't really, I'm when I go into I'm optimistic when I go into a record store that I'm going to find something I really, really want in that record
Yeah.
store. I think on that level, I can say that I certainly am optimistic in that. Yeah, every record store I go into, I expect that I'm going to find something that I'm going to be really pleased to find. On a larger scale, you know, I'm optimistic. My daughter's, I think, going to have a great career. She's a doctor of philosophy now, and she teaches at the University of San Diego. And I've seen all her hard work, and that gives me pride and optimism that all that work paid off for her. I mean, she's an incredibly bright person, but the amount of work she put in, she is my example of life. She is a person who had the talent, worked really, really hard, has a great personality, unlike her old man, and managed to put all that together and become a successful professor. So yeah, so that gives me. I'm optimistic about her.
But two quick follow-ups is, where'd you get your work ethic? Because it sounds like your daughter got her work ethic from you. Where did you get your work ethic?
Starting out, I had no work ethic. I mean, that's part of what Andrew had. Andrew was an exceedingly anal person, and when he said I'm going to be there at 9, he was there at 9, and I had to start work. I was a procrastinator for well, in high school, I just floated through high school. I mean, I would pass, but I would never do homework. I would never do anything. I had no work ethic whatsoever. When it came to writing in the early days, I would write because Andrew was there, and I had no, he was there, so I had to write. So I was forced into it. I think it was an evolution that I think my work ethic at some point overtook Andrew's, and I became the more ambitious one at some point in our relationship. And I I write almost every single day, whether it's for a script I'm being paid for, or it's something I'm writing for a blog, or it's something that 4 people will see. I will write entire novels for 3 people. Just again, it's it's how I feel good because it's the one thing I do well. So it gives me comfort. So my work ethic really is also my comfort. So it's not like it's an arduous task for me. Writing is a pleasure, which I've been blessed with because most writers I know, it isn't a pleasure. For me, it
Yeah.
still is.
This might be too personal, but where do you think your daughter got her work ethic?
Well, her mother is very well. She's very bright, and so I, I think we really, if I had to pick one thing that I maybe did well as a parent, and I don't take, try not to take any credit because Darby is just a force of nature by herself.
Yeah.
But in the early days, I would read to her every night. I would read books. So I read hundreds and thousands of books. I read when she was like 13. I would read. I read Lord of the Rings to her. It took me 6 months because I would read like a chapter or two every night, and but I think it got her that reading got her interested in the intellectual life, and we always did prize intellect and intellectual curiosity and knowing things, and that being a reward unto itself,
Yeah.
just to be have an inquisitive mind. And I think that has gone into who she is as a person. She obviously was born incredibly intelligent, but again, there are plenty of intelligent people living on the side of freeways.
Yeah.
So there's more to it than that. And I think over the years, she developed a she was always very very dedicated, and I think partly because her mother really paid attention to who she was as a person, and we all took pride in her work. So when she would do something from school, it wasn't like we did ignored it. If she wrote a story, we'd love to hear it, or I would help her with things. Or when we would go to see every play. We would, Judith worked every Friday, cooking lunches in the school mess, and I would go for work days and things. We made it that her school life was one of the most important things, not only to her but to us. It was an important thing to us that she got the most out of school, and hopefully that somehow sparked who she is.
Really well done, Darrell. It's been a true delight. I really appreciate this time together. And I just end with the fact that Groucho Marx was asked my last question at the end of his life: what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people. And it's like, yeah, you spend your life cutting down other people. But indeed, he needed, and I need other people, and you're one of them. Really been enlightening and fun. Thank you so much,
Well,
Darrell.
thank you for listening to me.
I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, but I
Okay.
hope it never ends. Keep me posted when I'm Over Here Mom comes out. Let me know. I
I
want to
will let you
know.
know. I still got a couple of big chapters to write, but it's coming along.
Yeah, we'll have to have another podcast when it comes out, and we'll talk about that.
Okay, man. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thank you, Darrell.
Okay. Bye bye.